Hey everybody, welcome to the video. So I'm breaking down the Instacart 500 at Phoenix Raceway on Sunday, March 14th at around 3:30 p.m. Eastern. And yes, we are short track racing. Not that Phoenix is the shortest track in the world, but it's still classified as a short track. It's 1 mile in length. So you guys know I love short tracks. I'm looking forward to it. I'm sure you guys are as well. But before we continue, if you find this video helpful in any way possible, please leave a like. The more you guys interact with my content, leaving likes, leaving comments, and all that good stuff, it's going to help push my video out to more people in the YouTube world. The more people that see it, the more it helps me out. So I do appreciate it. And my NASCAR community on here is absolutely awesome. So shout out to you guys each and every single week. You guys do a great job smashing the like button, leaving comments, hitting that subscribe button, which you should do if you haven't already. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. Getting close to 8,000 subscribers, which is awesome. So thank you once again for that. And while you're at it, you might as well hit that notification bell as well so you don't miss out whenever I post new content. And if you don't follow me over on social media, I'm at Pennell16 on Twitter and CPenn16 over on IG. So feel free to shoot me a follow, hit me up, whatever you want to do. And if you want to help support the channel over on Patreon, link is down below for that. I'll throw something on the screen so you know everything you get access to. But you get access into the entire spreadsheet, articles, Discord chat, which is always a good time. So if you want to join a community of several hundred members for NASCAR, link is down below for that. It's only $10 a month. And there's a lot of content on here. And I put a lot of work into this each and every single week. And do appreciate the Patreon supporters. You guys make this possible. It's what I get to do for a living, and I absolutely love it, so I appreciate that. And you guys make these free videos possible on YouTube. So you get access to the projections, power rankings, my GPP driver exposure, so you know exactly where I'm going each week. I can't be more transparent than that. The green flag speed cheat sheets, previous optimal lineups, 2020 slate analysis for this track, a whole bunch of stuff on there. Crew chief information, aero package schedule, pretty much everything you'd ever want. It is all available down there for $10 a month. So like I said, link will be down below for that. And one last thing before we get into the preview of this race, I do want to mention that I did partner with Monkey Knife Fight to be able to provide you guys this promo code to use over on their site, which I will link down in the description below. It's going to have the monkey emoji next to it, so I don't think you'll be able to miss it. But it's a fun site to play on as there's no salary caps or anything like that. You can bet on drivers scoring over under a certain amount of points and head-to-head matchups as well. So if you want to try it out, use code CPEN to get a free money bonus up to $50 on your first deposit. It's an instant match, so if you deposit $50, they're going to get you $50 for free. So I mean, that sounds like a really good deal to me, so check it out if you want. Again, that is code CPEN over on Monkey Knife Fight, and tell them I sent you. I think that's it for the shameless plug, so without further ado, let's get into the preview of this race. And as per usual, I gotta mention a few things before we start this video. So first off, if you want to know my live stream schedule this weekend, it's gonna be the same as last, but if you happen to miss it, or if you're new to the channel, I'll be live on my own channel right here at 11 a.m. Eastern on Sunday, just to chat it up with you guys. Nothing too serious, just a Q&A for the most part. You can ask me serious questions, you can ask me non-serious questions, just come in, hang out, it's always a good time, it's kind of laid back. Then if you want to follow me to the Awesemo YouTube channel, I'll be on the Awesemo live before lock show at around 2 or 2:30 p.m. with Jason Floyd and myself. We'll be breaking down questions, going over some strategy, talking dominators, place differential, things like that. So if you want to follow me in the live streams on Sunday. And secondly, if you guys want to join the DraftKings contest that I host each and every single week, it's just a fun way for me to interact with you guys, seeing what lineups you build, and you can compete against me, and you can win some money as well. But if you want to enter the contest, you just got to comment your DK username down below, say something nice with it, whatever you want to do. I don't really care, but if you say something nice, I'll definitely send you the invite real quick. If you say something mean, I might still send you the invite, but it just might be a little bit delayed. But if you want to join, like I said, just comment your DK username down below. And the first 100 people that accept, well, first 98 people, because me and my girlfriend always have a reserved spot. First 98 people will be able to get into the contest, just a first come, first serve basis. But I do want to give a quick shout out to the winners. I'll throw that on the screen right about now. And if you want to shout out on the channel, all you got to do is finish in the top 3 in this contest, and yeah, I will shout out your DK username. But coming in first place was G Money the Don, who I know has been here for quite some time. He was the only person to score above 300 points in this contest, but he absolutely killed it with 314 points. Then coming in second place, and he made the podium 2 weeks in a row. I know he's always active in my Discord. He's going to love this, but Big Andy Kane coming in second place. Back-to-back podium weeks for him, so shout out to you. And then Dirty Bird 27, I believe this is the second time he's been on the podium as well, so these two guys are absolutely killing it. And then right on the bubble was M Swingles 92, and then DePope 27, who I also know is in my Discord. So shout out to you guys. And if you guys want to get a chance to get a shout out like this or win some money, just again, comment your DK username down below to enter the contest. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So let's get into the preview of this race. And as previously mentioned, this is the Instacart 500 at Phoenix Raceway. There's your outline of the track, and it was reconfigured, I believe, about 6 races ago, so take that for what you will. But this is a short, flat track. It's 1 mile in length, and we have 312 laps. And if you're wondering why they're calling it the Instacart 500, because there's not 500 laps, And it's also not 500 miles. It's because 312 miles, I guess, equals around 500 kilometers. So that's why they got the 500 there. Plus, the 500 sounds more appealing to people watching TV or advertisers and all that fun stuff. And since we have 312 laps, we have over 200 dominator points available, which means dominator points are going to be pretty important. This is actually the most important they've been all season long. So when we're building lineups, I think we're looking at 2 to 3 dominator builds for the most part, because again, if you're only building one dominator, you might get away with that in cash games if you have a bunch of place differential guys, but if you want to take down tournaments, you're going to want 2 to 3 dominators in all of your lineups, because looking at the previous optimal lineups here, that's typically what we see. And in cash games this week, I would not recommend the 1 dominator strategy. I would go with 2 dominators. Probably not going to get the 3 dominators in cash games. If you want to go like 2 cheaper ones, maybe a Keselowski, that could work, but for the most part, I think 2 dom builds in cash, then in tournaments, 2 to 3 dominator builds. Also something to keep in mind, whenever NASCAR goes to a track that's Darlington size or below, I believe it's 1.3 miles or below, they will use the short track aero package. So typically we have the high downforce, low horsepower package at your intermediate tracks. But at a short track, we are going with the high horsepower, low downforce aero package, which is the 750 horsepower. So something to keep in mind, this is not the same aero package that we saw the last 2 races at the 1.5-mile tracks. And that's pretty much all you got to know for the preview. There's no like crazy strategy for this racetrack. You're just going to have to focus on those 2 to 3 dominator builds and fill out the rest of your lineup as you see fit. So I think without further ado, we can get into the driver by driver breakdown portion of this video, which is why I know everyone is here watching anyway. I really don't have any overall thoughts on the pricing that would be like a hot take or anything. I think they kind of did a fine job with it. I think they kind of overpriced Kevin Harvick in a little bit, like we'll talk about in a second. But you know, Chase Elliott, he's really good here. Logano's good here. Keselowski's good here. They priced him up, and it makes sense. So I have no issues with how they did their pricing this week. But we're gonna start up top with the man Kevin Harvick, $11,900. He is starting 18th, and I did think he was gonna be $12,000 this week, so I got him on a $100 discount here. But man, I'm a little bit nervous about Kevin Harvick. We know Kevin Harvick, you know, dating back to last year, the guy was the most dominant driver. He had almost 10 wins. He was an absolute rock star, and he was good in this race last year. I was rewatching the race. Him and Chase Elliott, those were the cars to beat early on. They were both really, really fast and really, really strong, and they both made the optimal lineup as well. Now, the problem with Kevin Harvick is, and really just Stewart-Haas Racing as a whole, they have not looked that great so far to start the season. I know it's a very small sample size, so I'm not willing to put too much stock into it, but it certainly is a bit concerning. And dating back to like when the playoffs started last year, Kevin Harvick has not been that great. I know last year overall he was absolutely amazing, but he hasn't really been dominating too much. And at nearly $12,000, we need him to dominate. If he gets a top 5 finish, yeah, that's fine. It's a decent day on DraftKings, but he's not going to be a better point per dollar play than a guy, let's say, Keselowski or Truex, if they happen to get up front and dominate, because their ceiling is very, very high. And if Kevin Harvick, I mean, I'd expect him to get a top 5 here, but if he does not dominate, he will not be in the winning lineup. So I'm not sure how much Kevin Harvick I want to get, which sounds crazy at Phoenix because this is one of Kevin Harvick's best tracks. He's absolutely amazing here. But I am a little bit concerned from what we've seen kind of like the later part of last year and so far this season, because he just really hasn't been too much of a dominator. But the numbers at Phoenix, they speak for themselves. He's very, very good here. The second best average finish, one of the best running positions, some of the best overall numbers. The guy is great at Phoenix. The recent finishes, if you want to get specific, 7th, 2nd, 5th, 9th, and 18th. So I really don't have anything bad to say about Kevin Harvick besides what we've seen recently. And he was pretty strong at the short flat tracks last year. Now, he wasn't as good as the big 3. And when I refer to the big 3, Chase Elliott, Joey Logano, Brett Keselowski, those guys were the big 3 at the short flat tracks last year. They were in a league of their own, and we'll get into that when I start talking about those guys, which we'll talk about Chase Elliott very soon here, but those guys were absolutely amazing. So Kevin Harvick, while I do expect him to have a pretty solid run, I have my doubts about him getting up front and dominating. At that price point, even though he's starting nearly in 20th place, we're going to need some dominator points out of Kevin Harvick. I'm not saying it's not possible, and I know a lot of people are going to be on the fade Kevin Harvick train because they just don't believe in the car anymore or whatever it is, and I totally get that. I know on Twitter I was making some lawnmower jokes for Kevin Harvick. I'm about to announce this guy as the new lawnmower man over Daniel Suarez last year. I mean, he was just not great at all last week, and neither were all the Stewart-Haas cars, so you're just going to have to hope they nail the setup, which is not something they have done yet. I know Kevin Harvick started the year with some strong finishes, but again, not really dominating. So the jury's still out there. I mean, I know we're going to a different aero package this weekend, so that could change some things a little bit. He was pretty solid in the aero package last year, so I'm not counting Kevin Harvick out, but I do have my doubts. Don't think I'd get there in cash games because of that price point, but in tournaments, people are going to start shying away from Kevin Harvick. I mean, just trying to get a feel of things on Twitter. I know people are not too happy with the guy. I know in my Discord chat, people kind of swore him off, So I totally get that. I'm not going to fade the guy. I'm going to have some exposure, but I don't think it's going to be anything too crazy, especially at that massive price point, because I don't think he's as likely to dominate in this race as guys priced below him, like Keselowski, Truex, Logano, Elliott, Larson, Heyman, Blaney. And if that's the case, it just doesn't make sense to me for me to have too much of Kevin Harvick this week. So it's kind of like my spiel on him. I know that's going to be a very popular question this week as people have the debate with themselves to Kevin Harvick or to not Kevin Harvick. And I think it's definitely warranted because I think the concerns are definitely a little bit real here. And then dropping down $400, we have one of my favorite dominators on the slate, despite being very expensive, but it's Chase Elliott here at $11,500. He is starting sixth. And if you guys remember anything about Phoenix last year, especially the championship race, Chase Elliott was in an absolute rocket ship. He was supposed to start in the pole in that race, ended up dropping to the rear, and he absolutely flew up through the field. I think before the stage was over, was he in the top 10? It was close to it. I was rewatching the race. I just remember seeing him in 13th place. I forget what lap that was, but he absolutely flew through the field. Said they gave him extra horsepower or something, but man, he was good in both Phoenix races. He was in the optimal lineup in both those races as well. He's got some of the most laps led here at Phoenix, some of the most fast laps. And looking at his finishes here, besides that one race and then one in 2018, they have been pretty strong. First, 7th, 39th, 14th, 23rd, and 3rd. But at the short flat tracks there, last year, like I was mentioning, there was the big three. We had Chase Elliott, Joey Logano, and Brad Keselowski. These guys were just far and away the best drivers in the field here. But Chase Elliott, he actually averaged the most DraftKings points per race at 84.4. The third best average finish of 4.7. One of the best running positions, driver ratings, 2 wins, 4 top 5, 6 top 10s, the most laps led, and the most fast laps. So assuming that speed shows up once again, I love Chase Elliott on all formats here. I'm not sure if I'll get there in cash games because of the price point, but if you can fit him in, I'd have no issue with that whatsoever. I think Chase Elliott should have another monster day. Would expect him to be in the top 5 for the majority of the race. And I'd be very, very shocked if he is not a lap leader at some point here. So love Chase Elliott despite that high price tag. And I'm really hoping that price tag keeps some people off him because I think that would be a big, big mistake. Was also top 5 or like top 3 in every single statistical categories at these track types last year and in green flag speed as well. And the next guy, Joey Logano, another member of the big three here at the short flat tracks, $11,100. He is starting 9th, and you can make a case for Joey Logano as being the best play on the entire slate. Now, you don't want to pair him with the guy starting closer to the front, like a Brad Keselowski, or Denny Hammond, or Kyle Larson, because starting 9th, I do think he can be up front in a hurry, but I think it's not very likely that he's going to lead laps early on, maybe more so in the second stage. But I like Logano a ton. He had the best average finish at these track types last year. He was first in average green flag speed. He won this race last year, the Spring Phoenix race. I can actually pull it up for you guys if you want to confirm what I'm saying. He did finish 3rd in the fall race and then 1st in the 2020 spring race. And overall, some pretty strong numbers at Phoenix. But looking at the short flat tracks last year, finished inside the top 5 every single race, had the 2nd most laps led, the 3rd most fast laps, over 81 DraftKings points per race, made the optimal lineup twice here at Phoenix, like Chase Elliott. So yeah, I'm definitely a big fan here. Big fan here of Joey Logano. I think you can play him in cash games as well, cash or tournaments. Then dropping down to this 10K range, we have Kyle Busch starting 7th at $10,800. He is finally not the most expensive driver on these slates, so I think he finally becomes in play, because when he was close to $12,000 every single week, I like Kyle Busch. I think he's a great driver. We know the struggles at this point without practice. But now that he's below $11,000, he becomes a little bit more playable, and he is really good at Phoenix. His numbers are pretty much first in every single category here the past 6 races. Close to 90 DraftKings points per race, the best average finish, 2 wins, really high driver rating, overall very, very strong numbers, the best dominator as well. The problem is we do not have practice, and actually, let me mention this here. The finishes are crazy for Kyle Busch. 11th, 3rd, 2nd, 1st, 1st, 2nd. He is really good at Phoenix. The problem is no practice has meant Kyle Busch has not been his old self. He has not been a dominator, and we don't have practice once again, so I'm not really sure why that would change too much here. And looking at the 2020 season at the short flat tracks, Kyle Busch's numbers were not that great at all. Only 28 DraftKings points per race, an average finish of 14.3. No wins, only 1 top 5. And at that price point, we absolutely need him in the top 5, and we need him to pick us some dominator points, because it's not like it's Kevin Harvick or he's starting close to 20th place. He is starting 7th, so we're playing him to lead laps and get fast laps, which is not something he did at all last year. I think he could have a top 5, top 6 finish here at Phoenix on Sunday, but if you don't think he's going to lead laps or anything, he is not going to be in the optimal lineup at that price point. So be careful with Kyle Busch. I think he's worth playing a little bit in tournaments, but wouldn't get there in cash games, and I just don't see why the trend's going to change of him not being much of a dominator these days without practice. Then dropping down to a guy I think is going to be pretty popular this week, it's Brad Keselowski on the pole at $10,400. Now, the one thing I'll give credit to for DraftKings is they did not price him below 10K, because if he's below 10K, we're probably looking at close to 50, 60% exposure or ownership on Brett Keselowski in tournaments this weekend, so I think him being below 10K should lower that a little bit. I know the pole sitter in the COVID era has been a little bit iffy, but the history for the guy starting in the front row at Phoenix for DFS purposes, you've definitely wanted those guys in your lineup because they typically get a lot of laps and they get a lot of fast laps as well. We can actually look at the starting position track stats here on the spreadsheet if I can find it really quick. Yeah, the starting position track stats. So the guy starting closer to the front, which I mean, I know it seems obvious, but it's just kind of like a real vast difference compared to everybody else in the field here. So guys starting first through fourth, they're just getting a large chunk of the fast laps in the lap set, which I know is nothing too out of the ordinary, but I do like the guys starting up front in Phoenix. And we saw last year, the guys that started up front kind of just finished up front. I would not be surprised if we see something like that happening again. So yeah, Brett Keselowski, I think he's an awesome play here. I know the competition caution does screw things up a bit, and I don't think we had an official tweet from Bob yet that there would be a competition caution, but I don't see why there wouldn't be. But either way, Keselowski, he was part of that big three at the short flat tracks last year. He was so good, and actually in the spring race here, he actually was in that wreck with Denny Hammond, Ryan Blaney, and obviously himself, Brett Keselowski, where they all three had an issue. Ryan Blaney ended up getting knocked out of the race. Denny Hammond had some pretty heavy damage, which just kind of killed his day. He didn't get out of the race, but he just wasn't really up to speed anymore. But Keselowski, he charged back through the field and actually got up front after that incident, led some laps, and had some dominator points, and was one of the best rosters of the entire day. And like I mentioned earlier, man, the short flat tracks are his bread and butter. I mean, looking at these numbers, overall dominant, the second most DraftKings points per race, the second best average finish, 2 wins, some of the most laps led, fast laps. So Brad Keselowski in the pole. I know the pole sitter it makes you a little bit nervous these days, but I feel pretty good about Brad Keselowski. I think he's one of the pole sitters that we can trust so far this season for sure. Like him in cash games and in tournaments. If you want to get different, you can do that, but I'm going to have a good chunk of Brad Keselowski this week for sure. Like, I liked being a little bit underweight in Kevin Harvick in tournaments last week. That ended up being the right call. I didn't think he was going to have that bad of a race. I just thought some other guys could pass him early on, but I didn't think he was going to be that bad. But Keselowski, I would not be surprised if he led the majority of the first stage, or maybe close to the entire thing. He should be there at the end of the race as well, because those Team Penske cars just were really good at the short flat tracks last year, including Ryan Blaney, Joey Logano, Brett Keselowski, and you can throw in Matty D in there as well. I know he's not officially Team Penske, but he's pretty much the fourth car for Wood Brothers Racing for Team Penske, and they all ran very, very well at these track types last season, and Phoenix specifically. And then to round out the 10K drivers, we have Martin Trex Jr. at $10,100, and I'm not like overly in love with Truex this week, but I do like that price tag quite a bit. Now, I would not be surprised if he got up front and got some laps and fast laps at some point. At that price point, I definitely think he should be on our radars. Actually does grade out pretty well in my projections compared to the other guys because of that price point. Now, if you're looking at last year's finish in the spring race, he did finish 32nd. You got to keep in mind, he did have one of the best cars in the field. He dropped to the rear, made his way up front, actually got up front at some point left and had some laps led, but he had an issue. I believe Eric Morola ran him over, ended up getting into the wall. Then his day was pretty much over at that point. But besides that race, the numbers at Phoenix aren't that bad. He finished 10th, 6th, 2nd, 14th, and 5th. And he's also very good at these track types as well. If you're looking at the past 10 races at these tracks, he's actually averaging the most DraftKings points per race, has the most wins, has the most laps led and fast laps. Now, a lot of that's going to be Martinsville, but he's also just overall pretty good at the short flat tracks. He's not just good at Martinsville. As you can see, the overall numbers in the 6 races at these tracks last season had a win, which was at Martinsville, but some over the overall best numbers. So Truex at that price point at $10,100, starting 5th, he is definitely a candidate to lead some laps early on, and I do like that price point a lot. And then getting into this 9K range, I'm a huge fan of these 9K drivers this week. I love Hamlin, Larson, Blaney, Morola. These are some of my favorite plays in the entire slate, and I feel like they could all be in that 10K range. So we are getting them at a bit of a value here, and these are some of my favorite dominators to get to pair them up with some of those more expensive dominators. But if you want to do those like 3 dominator builds, you can do it pretty easy if you just want to go with like a Hamlin, Larson, Blaney combo. All these guys have the potential lead laps, and they're kind of cheap as well. But you also like Morola for place differential. But starting up top with Denny Hammond at $9,900, he is starting 3rd, and he's very good at the short flat tracks, also pretty darn good at Phoenix. If we're looking at last year's finish in the spring race, like I mentioned earlier, he got into a bit of an issue with Ryan Blaney himself, Denny Hammond, and Brad Keselowski ended up finishing 20th. But besides that race, the numbers at Phoenix have been pretty good. 4th, 1st, 5th, 13th, and 4th place. In the past 10 races at the short flat tracks, that he's very good at these track types. I mean, close to 65 DraftKings points per race, 6 top 5s, which is only behind Brad Keselowski, some of the most laps led and the most fast laps. So I'm definitely a fan of Denny Hammond at that price point. Starting 3rd, so it's a little bit risky because there's no place differential upside, but he should be a contender to dominate at some point. And if something happens to Brad Keselowski early on, Denny Hammond should be right there with Kyle Larson to lead those laps early in stage 1. And speaking of Kyle Larson, 9,600 bucks. He is starting second. He absolutely went off last week. Had an amazing race, and I've had high hopes for Kyle Larson and Hendrick Motorsports this year, but I didn't think it was going to be this early. But Kyle Larson got the first win right out of the gates in Las Vegas. Looked excellent. I don't see why that's going to change. He's been in the 42 car for Chip Ganassi Racing his entire career, just getting every ounce of that car that he can get. And now that he's in a top tier ride, I think we're going to see Kyle Larson absolutely flourish. And this is a very good track for Kyle Larson. He didn't get to run the fall race here last year because obviously he was serving a suspension. But before that, he was great. And he actually finished fourth in this race last year in the 42 car. But fourth, sixth, third, had an 18th place finish in the 2018 spring race. But very good track for Kyle Larson. If we look at the past 10 races of these track types, the past 6 races last year, we don't have much of a sample size to look at because he was suspended. So I'm not going to do that. But I think Kyle Larson's an excellent play. And if you are going to fade Keselowski for some reason, Kyle Larson, Denny Hammond, those are the two guys you should probably be highest on. Because if Brad Keselowski can't do it early on, it's probably going to be one of those two drivers. And I have high hopes for Kyle Larson. Like I was showing you earlier, I think you can definitely play Kyle Larson with Brad Keselowski. I think people might be afraid to do that this week. But the past 2 optimal lineups here, I'll actually pull that up for you guys, give you guys a bit of a freebie. Past 2 optimal lineups, the guys starting first and second were in it last year. We had Kevin Harvick and Chase Elliott in the spring race. Then we had Chase Elliott, Joey Logano in the fall race. So it's definitely possible, and the pricing makes it actually pretty easy to do. So big fan of Kyle Larson here. I like that price point. I thought it should be above 10K, and we didn't get that. So starting second, he's in a good position to dominate at some point. I love his new car on Hendrick Motorsports for sure. So high hopes for Kyle Larson this season and this Sunday. And then dropping down to my guy Ryan Blaney, $9,300. He is starting 8th. I love that price point. This is the cheapest he's been all season, if I remember correctly. And he finally got back on track last week. Finally had a first good race. I think he got close to 70 DraftKings points, was in the top 5, or at least the top 5 contender for the majority of that race. And I like him here at Phoenix. He does have a good history here. I know the finish last year kind of skews his numbers a bit. Has an average finish of 16.5. Also had that 2018 race where he got into an issue as well. But besides those 2 races, he's finished 6th, 3rd, and then 16th. And I like Ryan Blaney quite a bit. He's on Team Penske, which those cars tend to run pretty darn well here at Phoenix. He's a good short track racer. Looking at his numbers last year, these track types, 2 top 5s, 3 top 10s. And again, those Phoenix numbers kind of skewed his numbers a bit. But $9,300, he's a cheap potential dominator. So he's certainly on my radar in tournaments. And starting 8th to get a little bit of place differential upside as well. And then Aric Almirola, a guy that I think a lot of people are going to have questions with because he has been awful to start the year, as have all the Stewart-Haas racing cars. So is it time to finally buy in, starting all the way back in 32nd at a track that he's pretty good at? I feel like it might be. He can't just keep getting these bad finishes. Even if he doesn't have the greatest race in the world, 15th place finish is around 50 DraftKings points. So he's got a pretty high floor, assuming he doesn't have an absolute junk race and finish 25th, which I can't expect that to keep happening. But the guy's got a legit shot of getting a top 10 finish, which would be close to 60 DraftKings points. Now, his ceiling isn't as high as guys like Kyle Larson, Denny Hammond, Ryan Blaney in his price range, but his floor is also higher than those guys. So in tournaments, I'd lean towards the extra dominator lineups because I assume you already have 2 Doms, and you're probably looking at a guy like either Ryan Blaney, Kyle Larson, or Aric Almirola as maybe your 3rd or 2nd driver in your lineup. In tournaments, I like getting exposure to the dominators because they have ceilings of over 100 points. Meanwhile, Aric Almirola is probably capped around 65 points. So just going to have to be how you're going to construct your lineups. Do you need that nice floor play with Aric Almirola, or do you want to go a little bit more contrarian and get a 3rd dominator in there that has the potential to lead a bunch of laps? So just going to have to be on how your specific lineup is looking. But I do like Aric Almirola here quite a bit. He actually is very good at Phoenix. He has an average finish inside the top 10, averaging close to 40 DraftKings points per race here, 2 top 5s, 4 top 10 finishes. And looking at his specific numbers at Phoenix, looking at the recent finishes, besides that 2019 race where he finished 22nd, Almirola's been lights out here. 13th, 8th, 4th, and 7th. For the most part, he has been a top 10 guy every single race here at Phoenix, and I don't see why those numbers would change too much. In looking at his numbers at the short flat tracks last year, overall pretty strong. An average finish of 12.7, which is right on par with his average running position. No top 5s, but you don't need a top 5 from Morola to have a good day here on DraftKings. But had 4 top 10s and 5 top 15s in 6 races. So I think in cash games, Almirola is one of those guys you're probably just going to lock in those place differential points. But in tournaments, I do not mind pivoting to a potential dominator in his place. And then dipping our toes into the 8K range, we have some interesting plays here. Starting off with Alex Bowman at $8,700. He's starting back in 21st. Now, he has a weird history at Phoenix. He did have that one good race, but for the most part, his numbers at Phoenix aren't that great now. He's kind of getting weighed down from those 3 bad finishes in a row from the 2018 fall race to the 2019 fall race. Besides that, 16th, 14th, and 13th, and he did have that one pretty strong race, but for the most part, his overall numbers don't look that great. Average DK points per race of 8.4, average finish at 21.8. But I'm a believer in these Hendrick Motorsport cars this year. I mean, they've been showing tons of speed. We've seen Chase Elliott look good, besides a couple of incidents, especially last race. He kind of got screwed. William Byron won a race. Kyle Larson won a race. I know Alex Bowman had the issue as well, but he's looked fast in his races so far this season. So, assuming their speed just continues to show up, I don't have any issues wanting to play Alex Bowman here. Looking at the short flat track numbers last year, pretty good. Average finish of 11th, running position of 11.5, 3 top 10s, 5 top 15s, finished inside the top 20 each and every single time. And starting 21st, I think he's a fine place differential play. I assume the masses will go with Aric Almirola here, so if you want a decent pivot off of Aric Almirola, I don't mind going with Alex Bowman, a guy that has top 5 potential and which should be a pretty darn fast race car. And then going down to MDB here, 8,500, he is starting 20th. Finally had a decent finish last week. Now, I think it could have been a bit better, but he had that tire issue where he kind of had to milk it at the end, nurse it, whatever you want to call it, where he just had to kind of limp around for a good finish. It looked like he could have been close to a top 10 guy. Unfortunately, ended up falling out of it. But MDB last year at the Phoenix races, he was pretty strong, finished 8th and 13th. And like I mentioned earlier, he's pretty much that 4th Penske car. And those Penske cars brought some speed to the short flat tracks last year. And MDB's numbers weren't too bad either. An average finish of 10.2, running position of 12.1. Had 4 top 10 finishes, 5 top 15s, and 6 top 20s. So MDB starting 20th at $8,500. He is certainly on my radar on Sunday. Definitely think he's a pretty strong PD play. Then William Byron at $8,300. He is starting 10th. So I actually like him a lot. And if a lot of people are going to flock to Almirola, Alex Bowman, and MDB, I like being overweight in tournaments on William Byron starting 10th. Now, I know he's starting a little bit up high, but like I said earlier, I'm a big believer in these Hendrick cars, and I think William Byron's got a sneaky shot of getting a top 5 finish, or at least should be a top 10 guy for most of the day, and I feel like he's a bit underpriced here. I know he doesn't offer us the PD upside that Alex Bowman and MDB do, but that's going to keep people off him, and I think he's got a very decent shot of having a good race here. He's actually really good at Phoenix. In the past 6 races here for William Byron, he's got 3 top 10 finishes, 4 top 15s, and 5 top 20s with an average finish of 13.5. And that's kind of weighed down from those 2019 numbers where he finished 17th and 14th. But if you take those out of the equation, he's finished 9th, 10th, 9th, and 12th. So for the most part, the guy's a top 12 guy. And from what we've seen this year, another year of experience for William Byron, I think he could be a top 8, top 5 guy in this race, pick up some fast laps, and overall have a pretty strong day. And last year he was strong at these track types, finishing 3 top 10s, 4 top 15s. So yeah, I like William Byron a lot in tournaments. Actually one of my favorite pivots in this price range for sure. And then Christopher Bell, I want to like Christopher Bell. I love the car that he's in. It's obviously an upgrade from last year, because we could spend time looking at his numbers last season in his old car, but I feel like that's a waste of time, because that car is obviously not up to par than what the 20 car is for Joe Gibbs Racing. So maybe we should look at what Erik Jones did. So Erik Jones' finishes at Phoenix weren't that impressive. 22nd, 28th. They had that 7th place finish in 2019, then 29th, 17th, and 9th. For the most part, Jones was around that 15th place range at the short flat tracks last year. I feel like Bell can put up a little bit better numbers. Not to say Erik Jones is a bad driver or anything. It's just I want to believe in Bell here. The problem is he's starting so far up in 4th. He's going to have to hold his spot, which I just can't see him finishing over guys. Like, I can name 5 guys right now: Ryan Blaney, Kyle Larson, Denny Hammond, Martin Truex Jr., Brett Keselowski, Joey Logano, Chase Elliott. I feel like he's almost a guarantee to lose spots. I don't think he's going to get up front at some point. If he does, he'll obviously be a very good play. I plan on having like maybe 5% or less of Christopher Bell this week. I just don't see him getting up front. So not a big fan of Christopher Bell starting all the way up in 4th. Then I think what's a pretty interesting play here in the 7K range, we have Tyler Reddick just below 8K at $700. He is starting 23rd, and if you look at his numbers last year, you see he finished 33rd and 19th. But this 33rd is a big false flag here, because he definitely was not the 33rd best car in that race. And actually, Tyler Reddick was giving the front runner a run for his money for a little bit, because Reddick was just ripping through the field, and he actually got up to 2nd place at one point. He was picking up a bunch of fast laps, and he was looking really, really good until he had a bit of an issue, and then it just ended his day. So Tyler Reddick was the guy that literally had a top 5 potential car. I'm not sure he would have finished top 5, but he was looking really, really good, and there was no tire excuse, because everyone pitted, and he passed Kyle Busch straight up, and at the time we had practice, so that was a really impressive thing for Tyler Reddick to do, just to pass Kyle Busch at Phoenix straight up. So I think there's definitely some upside here. He should be a top 12, top 15 contender with top 10 upside. So I know the numbers don't look great for Tyler Reddick because he only has 2 races here and the finishes haven't been that great. But I mean, he showed a ton of speed in this spring race last year, so I don't mind taking some stabs at Tyler Reddick for some place differential upside. And then Kurt Busch, $7,700. He is starting in 12th, so I feel like people aren't going to click on his name, especially starting between guys that are starting 23rd and 26th. But Kurt Busch is actually one of my favorite tournament plays in the entire slate. He is just one of the most consistent drivers in NASCAR. And starting 12th, I know there's not a place differential upside, but I would be very shocked if he does not get a top 10 finish here, and I love that price point as well. Looking at his recent numbers here, 3 top 10 finishes, 5 top 15s, and looking at the actual finishes here at Phoenix, 12th, 6th, 11th, 7th, had a bad finish in 2018 fall race, 32nd, but then 10th place. So besides that 32nd place race, he's been in the top 12 each and every single time, and at the short flat tracks last year, numbers were pretty solid. Finished at the top 20 every single time, 5 top 15s, 3 top 10s, and average finish around 10th place. So the top 10 machine, I think he continues that. So I'm liking Kurt Busch a lot in tournaments, and I'm really hoping that 12th place starting spot keeps some people off him because I think he's a bit too cheap this week over on DraftKings. And then after that, we have the rookie Chase Briscoe. He's in one of those Stewart Haas cars, which just have not looked that great to start the season. But starting back in 26, which is in $7,500 is kind of around the price range where he's been all season long. I think he's a fine place differential play. I'll kind of leave it at that. Obviously, we have no cup numbers to look at here, but I still think Chase Briscoe's got top 20 upside, and that price isn't too bad. So don't hate having a little bit of Briscoe just to get some place differential in there. Austin Dillon, $7,400. He's starting 13th. His numbers at Phoenix aren't that great. Only has 1 top 10 finish here the past 6 races, and his recent finishes here at Phoenix, not that good. I know he had an issue in the 2020 spring race, which, trust me, I was well aware of that. I had a large chunk of Austin Dillon. I actually looked back at my recent exposures in that race, and he was actually one of my highest owned drivers, and that obviously didn't go too well. I believe it was very chalky that day because he was starting in the 30s, but overall it was not a very good race for Austin Dillon, but his finishes aren't that impressive either. 18th, 36th, 24th, 21st. Had a nice 8th place finish in the 2018 fall race, but besides that, hasn't been too good of a run here for Austin Dillon. If we're looking at his numbers at the short flat tracks last year, once again, not that impressive. Did have that really good race. I want to say it was Richmond where he was a bit of a dominator, had one of the best cars in the field, but besides that, numbers aren't overly impressive. So starting 13th, I'm not going to full fade Austin Dillon, but I'm not going to have a large chunk of him either. But I do think there's a little bit of top 10 upside, but not really a big fan of Austin Dillon. Then Bubba Wallace, $7,200, starting 25th. He has not had a good start to the season in the new 23 car, and I know a lot of people definitely throwing a lot of hate on Bubba Wallace. I'm still thinking it's too early in the season to make any foregone conclusions on Bubba, so starting 25th, he's getting help from Joe Gibbs Racing. I still think he can be a positive place differential play, but I'm not expecting anything too much from Bubba. Now, his numbers at Phoenix in the old 43 car, 15th, 19th, 25th, 22nd, 10th, and 28th. Not the most impressive numbers in the world, but this is definitely a much better car. I think he's got top 15 upside here with top 10 potential. Not saying it's the most likely thing in the world, but I definitely think he's a top 20 car as long as he doesn't have any issues. So at $7,200, I don't mind Bubba for some place differential upside. And looking at his numbers at the short flat tracks last year, he had an average finish inside the top 20, and that's in the 43 cars. So I think he should be a top 15 guy here. And then Erik Jones, the guy that took over the 43 car, he had a really good race last week, had a top 10 finish, which was really impressive from Erik Jones. Shout out to him, especially in that 43 car. Definitely not what the 20 car used to be, but I don't like Erik Jones too much here. His numbers at Phoenix aren't overly impressive. Now he's in a car downgrade, and he's starting all the way up in 14th. I feel like he should be a bit cheaper here, so I'm honestly not too big of a fan of Erik Jones. I think he can hold his ground for the most part, but I don't think we're going to see him inside the top 10 this week. I mean, could be wrong, so maybe you want to put a little bit of Erik Jones in your lineups, but I'm not going to be overly excited about wanting to roster Erik Jones this week. Getting into the 6K range, I think we got a couple of decent plays down here, which is good because we're going to have to use some of these guys to fit in our dominators this week. But Raj Chastain, starting back in 22nd, he's at $6,900. Filling in for Ryan Newman last year, he wasn't having the worst race in the world. He ended up finishing 23rd. I want to say he spun out. I might be wrong. I want to say he spun out though at the very end, but looking at his recent numbers here, it's a waste of time because he was an absolute junk equipment, so I'm not even going to do that. But now he's in the 42 car. Kyle Larson was able to have some pretty strong runs. Now, I'm not saying he's Kyle Larson by any means, but he's an aggressive driver. But if it works out for him, I think he has the potential to get a top 15, top 20 finish, which is not that bad for where he's starting and his price point. And then the guy that failed us all last week, Cole Custer, I liked him a lot. He was actually my highest owned driver, and he was also the highest owned driver on the slate, and he absolutely busted alongside all of his Stewart-Haas teammates, Kevin Harvick, himself, Eric Morola, and Chase Briscoe. All those guys had absolutely awful races and awful days on DraftKings, and those were some of the highest owned drivers on the slate as well, so it was definitely a lower scoring week, but I'm going to be back in on Cole Custer here. I like the price point. I know I am a little bit worried about these Stewart-Haas cars so far, but his numbers at the short flat tracks last year weren't that bad. He had an average finish of 16.8, 2 top 10 finishes, and 4 top 15s. Also know he had a race with an issue, and he actually finished 9th here in the spring race, so I know the issues are there. I know the Stewart-Haas cars have definitely not looked that great, but starting 24th at $6,700, I'm going to be back in on Cole Custer. If he burns me again, he burns me again, but I'm willing to go back to the well here at that price point. He's pretty much my favorite cheap play of the week, if you want to count him as a cheap play at $6,700. And then Ryan Newman here, he's starting 19th. I feel like that's right around where he's going to finish, but there's a little bit of upside here for Ryan Newman. His numbers at Phoenix are not that bad. If I can pull up the recent track history. Yeah, average finish at 15.2, running position at 15.5, just had 3 top 15 finishes and 4 top 20s. The thing is, last year at these track types, Ryan Newman wasn't like overly impressive, had an average finish of 19.6, right around where he's starting, and that was right on par with his average running position as well. So I think he's a fine cheap play for a guy that can hold his ground for a top 20 finish, but I would not really expect a top 15, top 12 finish from Ryan Newman here. I think he's a pretty boring play for the most part, but sometimes boring plays aren't the worst plays in the world because they're better than guys that are going really aggressive and happen to wreck out. Chris Buescher, $6,400. He's starting 17th. Another guy I feel like can finish right around where he starts. Average finish of 19.3 here. He's been a top 20 machine, has 5 top 20s the past 6 races here. I just feel like the upside is limited where he's starting in 17th. But I do like that price point quite a bit. Now, his numbers at the short flat tracks last year were not overly impressive. An average drive rating of 55.7, which is pretty nasty. Finish of 22.8, so I don't have high hopes for Chris Buescher, but I don't hate getting some exposure to him just because of the price point. He has been running pretty well so far this season. I think he's been in 2 optimal lineups in a row as well. And then we have Michael McDowell, $6,200. The magic kind of finally wore off for Michael McDowell. Didn't have an awful race last week, but it's certainly not what you wanted for where he was starting because he was starting so far up. But starting 16th, I feel like he could hold his ground. Now, his numbers at Phoenix aren't that impressive. Average finish of 25.5 and an average running position of 23.8 and only 2 top 20 finishes. So I don't have a ton of hope for Michael McDowell, but he does have 2 16th place finishes the past 6 races here. So if he holds his position at $6,200, it's not the worst thing in the world, but I really don't see Michael McDowell competing for a top 15 here, so I'd tread very lightly with Mr. McDowell. Cory Joy, $6,000. He's starting all the way back in 33rd. His history at Phoenix is also not very good. If we're looking at what he did last year at the short flat tracks, I mean, the numbers aren't terrible. Average running position of 24.9, which is close to 8 spots further up than where he's starting. So if he did that, that's actually not the worst play in the world at $6,000. He does offer us a little bit of place differential upside. It's just I don't feel like the ceiling is super high for Cory Joy, but I'll have a little bit of Cory Joy just because we're going to need some cheap drivers, and he does offer us a decent amount of place differential upside because he does have, a little bit of top 25 potential. And really after that, I don't have strong opinions on any of these guys. I think Daniel Suarez is a fine, cheap place differential guy. We've seen that this car has a little bit more juice this year. Not that he's in the same car, but now in the 99 car for Trackhouse Racing. It's definitely been a bit of improvement, so I like Daniel Suarez for a top 25 finish. That's not that bad, below $6,000. Anthony Alfredo, he's got top 25 upside as well. Now, Ryan Preece and Ricky Stenos Jr., this is where it gets a little bit more tricky. Preece has actually had a pretty solid start to the season, and that's evident for where he's starting in 15th place. So I don't hate Ryan Preece here. He had a very good race last week, which I know is not really much of a factor for this week, but it has been nice to see that Ryan Preece has been able to put together some decent finishes. So I know he's starting 15th, but he is cheap, and I think there is maybe a decent chance, maybe not a decent chance, but an outside chance of him staying right around where he's starting. That might not be the worst thing in the world, even though he's not going to get you a bunch of place differential points. And then one guy that I was really surprised where he's priced, it's Ricky Stenos Jr. here at $5,500. I know he's starting really far up, and I feel like he's almost a guaranteed lock to lose spots, but if he can hang within the top 15 at $5,500, that might not be the worst play in the world. Now, the short flat tracks are not his bread and butter by any means. Looking at the numbers last year at these track types, they weren't that great for him. He had an average finish of 20.3, running position of 20.7, 1 top 15 and 3 top 20s. And actually, Ryan Preece at these track types last year, I probably should have mentioned that, he had 4 top 20 finishes in 6 races, so I actually think Ryan Preece is somewhat playable down low, as is Ricky Stenhouse Jr. And I almost want to say I prefer Preece over Stenhouse because he's starting 4 spots further back, but these guys are kind of just mix and match down low to make the guys up top work. And then after Ricky Stenhouse, we start getting into the scrub territory. And guys like James Davison starting all the way back in 38th, he can't lose you any spots, so I think he's viable just because of that. If we're looking at his numbers last year at the short flat tracks, Davison had a running position of 34th and right on par with his average finish of 34th as well. So I know it's not great, but he can't lose you any spots, and he could gain you a handful of as well. So if you want to make that work so you can get some guys up top, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. JJ Yaley, he has numbers at Phoenix actually aren't terrible, but it's nothing really to get excited about either. But I could see him finishing around 30th place, which is not the worst thing in the world at his price point. Justin Haley starting 29th. You can play a little bit of him, but nothing. Again, I don't really like any of these guys. If you're going this low, it's just to fit in a bunch of dominators. And I don't typically like to go down this low, but actually last year we did see a scrub make the optimal lineup in the fall race, which was the championship race, so circumstances are a little bit different, but it did happen. Quinn Houff, Timmy Hill, Josh Bilicki, Cody Ware, BJ McLeod, all these guys suck for the most part. BJ McLeod, he's the cheapest driver. I could see him kind of hanging around where he starts. So it might not be the worst thing in the world, but again, these scrub drivers, you're just kind of setting Fantasy Cruncher at a 1 to 2% max and just mixing and matching if you have to, just to fit in a bunch of dominators in your lineup. But with that being said, guys, I think that's going to be it for the video. So if you made it all the way through, please let me know in the comments below. You guys are awesome if you do make it all the way through, because I know these videos are quite long, but I do appreciate it. If you haven't already, make sure you hit that like button if you found this video helpful in any way possible. And make sure you hit that subscribe button if you're new to the channel or if you haven't already. And while you're at it, you might as well hit that notification bell as well so you don't miss out whenever new content is posted to this channel. And if you don't follow me over on social media, you can follow my Instagram like right there. Yeah, right there. And then my Twitter all the way to the left. Sorry, it's backwards on my laptop, so I can't do it right. But you can see them on the screen. And if you help support the channel over on Patreon, link is down below. I'll throw something on the screen so you know exactly what you get. But $10 a month, Discord chat, all that fun stuff. So check it out if you want. It does help the channel out, or me personally, I guess. And again, if you want to check out monkeyknifefight.com, use the link down below. It's right next to the monkey emoji, so you can't miss it. But you get a free money bonus up to $50. Instant match, so if you deposit $50, you'll get $50 with it. Or if you deposit $25, you'll get $25. So that's how it works. But use code CPEN using that link down below. And yeah, that's going to be it, guys. I appreciate you watching. I'll see you guys on Sunday for the live streams on my channel and then on the Awesemo YouTube channel as well.